Good evening, my friends. Welcome to Hilbert's Laboratory, the Ghost Story Room. My two friends and I went to the gorgeous Hauer House in Akron, Ohio, in 2023, when many of the restrictions imposed by the pandemic were lifted. The house is not far from Akron University and has a sorority house nearby. I believe I ought to supply you with some critical foundation. I know, yet another history lesson from her. Notwithstanding, I feel this foundation might supply some conceivable knowledge concerning the idea of the hauntings, in the house as well as, purportedly, on the actual property. It was all Indian land before the house was even built. Can we just look at things objectively for a moment? Before the settlers arrived, the native people were Indians, as a result. That fact may provide some paranormal speculation material. John Henry Hauer moved to Akron from Doylestown, Ohio in 1865 with his significant other Susan Junker Hauer. They had 3 children. The house, really a manor, was developed in 1871 and comprises 28 rooms that the Hauer family completely filled with beautiful and colorful gifts, relics from everywhere the world, assuming that I had their cash, I'd consume mine. All around Voyage family. John worked as a miller reaper, processing grain into cereal. Tons of cereal, enough oat that it made him incredibly affluent. He became known as the dad of Akron industry, with that tremendous riches. He really wanted a residence with regard to his status locally, an extremely terrific dwelling. Without a doubt, the structure is a Victorian chateau built in the second realm Italianate style. It is flawless, pardon me, however I love such houses. I wouldn't want to live there ever. An excess of upkeep, however, okay to visit them. John's most memorable spouse, Susan, passed on from one of the numerous lethal illnesses that were common during those years. Nonetheless, Susan made John guarantee that he'd at absolutely no point ever wed in the future. A fairly nonsensical solicitation, I think. He got desolate and remarried 4 years after the fact to his subsequent spouse, Rebecca. Please bear with me as I explain the specifics of why I'm sharing this little fact. There were a lot of servants needed for the mansion, so a building was needed to house them. The workers' quarters were a different structure close by. The previous workers' quarters were, a lot later, transformed into a sorority house, yet inclining further toward that later. John Hauer's subsequent child, Milton Otis Hauer, moved in with his significant other and 2 youngsters, Elegance and John, numerous years after the fact. In 1900, John composed a letter to his child portraying a few uncommon happenings, for example, drifting lights, that were showing up in the house that his mom saw. They didn't, however, feel threatened by the events. The Hauer family lived in the chateau for quite a long time until the last matron of the family, Elegance, gave and willed the whole bequest to the College of Akron in 1973. It was transformed into an exhibition hall and has been working in that limit since the 1980s. Friends, this is where things get really interesting. The College of Akron would send 2 female understudies from the close-by sorority house to reside and work in the historical center for a little while. While working there, the 2 young women would get room and board while keeping an eye on the place after tours ended. Notwithstanding, before I proceed, I might want to contribute the way that this house and its paranormal history have been recorded sometime before this post I submit here. One of the tales expounded on it was in a book on Ohio's paranormal occasions named It Came From Ohio, written in 2012 by James Renner, a paranormal specialist and essayist. He would visit places that were said to be haunted, talk to witnesses, and try to get his own first-hand information. Ohio's spooky history goes as far as possible back to the Progressive Conflict. Just providing some information in case any of you are interested. You might be shocked by what has happened in Ohio. Presently, to proceed. In the late 1990s, Renner conducted an interview with one of the 2 young women who were staying in the mansion. The young lady he talked with, Ashley, began living at the manor in 1998 and remained for a long time. She told him that, as usual, she had her own experiences before she believed the place's ghost stories. She claimed that every night she would hear a constant knocking on the closet door. It frightened her. She discovered that 100 years back, a maid would secure her kids in that storage room to rebuff them. One of the kids, a kid, had a mallet and would beat within the entryway, arguing to be let out. The justification for the thumping she gathered. When she found out that she slept with the closet door open, she and another roommate would wake up to hear someone playing the piano downstairs. They called the police. Before the official went into the house, he approached the radio for reinforcement and to bring their proton packs. He told Ashley that it wasn't the first time the police had been called to that house for such disturbances, and that they had been called there for a long time for many more. One night she had her beau over. They were sitting in her room and her sweetheart was confronting the entryway when she saw that his face froze while she was conversing with him. The open door caught his attention. She turned upward and the two of them saw an old lady stroll by in something like a long robe dragging along her. However, they heard positively no strides. The lady they saw matched the picture in the passage of the last female authority of the family, elegance. Some way or another she was out of the picture and strolling about the house. Ashley called her companion who worked there before her. Her companion told her that effortlessness could have done without men in the house. That is the reason they generally took in female overseers to remain there. It reached a crucial stage when, one evening, this phantom went after her sweetheart. He awakened her one night canvassed in sweat and white as a sheet. He told her that the bed sheets were yanked up around his neck so close as to start gagging him, while he heard a female voice murmuring something horrendous in his ear. Ashley left soon after that, and another young lady had her spot, subsequently adding to the long queue of observers to the movement in the house. The last occasion that occurred was the point at which a school safety officer answered look at an unsettling influence late one evening. He took off his shoes to avoid damaging the lovely entranceway carpeting. While he was examining the floors, he obviously heard a female voice harshly express, "Escape my home." He left without his shoes because he was so scared. Some people have speculated that Susan Hauer, John's first wife, may be the spirit of the man who broke his vow to never get married again, thusly disliking all men who enter her home. Now that I've established a fairly solid foundation, let me turn to my own encounter with my friends while we were touring that magnificent mansion. We needed to take an independent visit and, at the same time, learn to expect the unexpected. You must be joined by a female understudy screen. She was exceptionally quite remorseful about going with us, and my companions were a piece put off by this. I approached them and clarified for them that, potentially, some under legit vacationers might have come through and taken a portion of the numerous lovely old-fashioned relics during a few past visits. Consequently, it is important to have a screen gone along to forestall any further burglaries. All things considered, she didn't know us by and by. Not to mention know how genuine we were. We acknowledged it on those grounds and allowed her to chase after us. She would be happy to answer any questions we had about the house. I was just looking at the wonderful antique furniture, dishes, china, jewelry, ivory carvings, candelabras, family portraits, Tiffany lamps, crystal lighting fixtures, and family heirlooms while I was in Victorian paradise. Just right. We inclined toward the second floor to partake in the other wonderful rooms and what have you. While we were remaining in the foyer respecting a flawless pecan parlor table with fragile lights and photo placements, beyond a room with a shut entryway, we as a whole heard some fairly perceptible and uproarious thumping inside that room. We scrutinized the screen, yet she recently said that the room was constantly locked and nothing was in there. We countered by saying that there had to be someone in that room because of the loud knocking, but she just went pale, said she didn't have a key to enter, and looked a little shaken. We understood that she was scared right now and allowed it to drop. Although it was a little creepy, it did not diminish our enjoyment of touring that wonderful location. Nonetheless, not long before we left for the day, I sent a psychological solicitation to whatever, or whomever, that we partook in the house, and advised it to keep on remaining in its wonderful house, and be blissful, and not to follow us home. I expressed gratitude toward them for allowing us to see their lovely home and hoped everything would work out for it. Could sound senseless, however, I could do without taking risks. Other visitors have claimed to have encountered what they thought were Indians roaming the ground's outer perimeter, but I am unable to either confirm or deny those claims. The Hauer House in Akron is certainly worth the expense of affirmation. Despite the absence of spirits,